And now that the federal government has given approval for secondary schools to reopen on the 4th of August for exit classes, students can now prepare for their final examinations.
They will have 2 weeks to prepare for the West Africa examinations, which is scheduled to commence on the 17th of August. The decisions were reached at a virtual consultative meeting of the Federal Ministry of Education with commissioners for education of the 36 states, the Nigeria Union of Teachers, Proprietors of Private Schools, and chief executives of examination bodies.
While the government may have bowed to pressure to reopen schools, there are concerns on whether safety protocols will be adhered to so that the schools do not become an incubation hub for coronavirus. Joining us now is strategy consultant and public affairs analyst Dipo Oyewole. Dipo, good morning.
Good morning.
Nice to see you.
Good to see you.
Great. When you heard of exit classes reopening, because there has been a back and forth, we will resume, no, we will not resume, we will not resume, no, we have to resume, and all of that, and government decides eventually to fix the date for exit classes to resume, I wonder what came to your mind when it comes to the safety of children and, keeping the education system going.
Okay, for me, it was a bit of a mixed reaction because, yes, we can't say that because of the pandemic that students won't go ahead with their lives and then exit the classes they're supposed to exit. But that being said, it also brought a sense of concern. Concern in the sense that up until now, I'm not sure that we've really done everything we ought to do to ensure that people are safe and that the spread of the virus has been limited. Yes, now they've said that exit classes should go back to school, but the question is, the schools, both private and public, what mechanisms have they put in place to ensure that the safety of these children are in place? Now, it's good that it's just the exit classes because I would expect that erstwhile classes that have been cramped up, they won't have that issue any longer. Would a class where you have maybe 40 students will have maybe 20 or 10 because the other classes are unoccupied, so you could spread them across. So yes, that could do. But at the same time, the other safety protocols, are they being put in place? So I would expect that the federal ministry and the state ministries of health and even the local government health officials go around to the schools and see if these safety measures are being adhered to. Because either you like it or not, God forbid if a school becomes a ground zero, it will become a second wave and it will be wave after wave after that.
All right. You would recall that the government put up conditions for schools to even reopen in the first place. And some of the conditions were provision of infrastructure for social distancing, disinfecting schools, provision of water and soap for hand washing, provision of infrared thermometers, appointing incident managers, appointing classroom wardens, amongst others.
Yes.
Isn't this holistic enough at addressing whatever concerns that might come up as the students resume?
Theoretically, it is, but like we know, when you get to do something for 1-2 weeks, generally as human beings, okay, I won't say Nigerians, complacency gets in the way. Okay, so we've done this for the first week, done this for the second week, and then people start to relax. Okay, and then they say, okay, you know what, we've checked the temperatures of maybe the first 20, the next 10 don't count, the next 20 don't count. Complacency gets in the way. So that's why I said that I think it will be nice and it will be responsible if government officials paid impromptu visits to these schools at random so that they get to see if these safety protocols are being adhered to.
But the challenge there is talking about government officials, because if they are not the experts, the likelihood of sentiments, the likelihood of coming up with judgments that may not necessarily be in line with the health protocol, because it's a health thing. As much as we see it as a social thing, it's also it's of a health concern.
Yes.
So shouldn't there be people who should know these things and how to, instead of politicians?
Yes, so when I say people in government, I mean people from the Ministry of Health, which I would assume that some of them have some background in the medical field. Also, I don't know the strength or the manpower of the NCDC, if they can have some folks attached to them and then they go around together with them to see how we can even train people, because I would expect that even before the schools resume, there are certain people who are designated to be trained. You mentioned incident officers. These people ought to be trained to ensure that the protocols are carried out and they're carried out to the letter. So yes, I would expect that everything that we ought to do, we throw everything we have at it, because like I said, we don't want the schools to be the ground zero for the second and third wave.
But you know
of the virus.
that whatever conditions government give when it comes to schools, government has its role to play, the school has its role to play,
Yes.
so are parents
Yes.
who have children going to the schools. What do you think parents could do to perhaps bridge the gap with regards to all of this?
Well, parents need to be responsible enough to ensure that even if you're being careless with the life of your child, you're also being careless of the lives of other children. Okay, so if you have that sense of responsibility, which I don't believe any parent will be careless with the life of their children anyway. So if you have that sense of responsibility and then you're doing all you can within your own household to ensure that you keep yourself safe, by keeping yourself safe, because now you've been going to the market, you've been going to your place of work, ensuring that you are safe and you don't come home with the virus to infect your child that will end up going to school to infect others. So I think that yes, we all need to do all we should to ensure that we stay safe, we stay alive, and then we stay protected.
All right. Now, our schools resume on the 4th of August. The exams is expected to hold in about 2 weeks after that time. How
Yes.
adequate do you think the 2 weeks is for children who have not been in school for several months now to prepare for an exam like that?
Okay, well, the proper assumption is all this while they've been reading, but of course we know,
That's
we know
it. I like-
that's a
And
bit
the
far
people-
from the truth.
Deepo, I like the way you put it. I like the way you put it. Assumption.
Yes, that's
exactly.
a clear assumption. but we
Beautiful,
know-
beautiful.
But we know there's been a lot of screen time and all of that. Yeah, so I would expect that there'll be a lot of crash courses. There'll be one or two mock exams in play. So yes, I would expect that the school authorities see how they can bridge that gap. To see that all the months that may have seemed to have been lost, that they get them back within those 2 weeks. But
Some
yes.
experts say there's going to be mass failure.
Failure, yes. That's
yes,
the concern
that's-
of a majority of persons.
Yes, that's also a huge possibility because, I mean, they've been out of circulation for how long? And then you're bringing them back, start stuffing things in their head, and then they say, okay, you know what, I think I'm not getting it. And the 2 weeks may seem short. But yes, I would also understand from the side of government saying that they're pushing the resumption date far ahead to ensure that people are also ready. I mean, the schools now and relevant authorities and the stakeholders are also ready to ensure that the environment is safe. And it isn't just about the examinations, but prioritizing their own safety. I mean, the safety of the children and the teachers as well.
Where does this leave some schools that you might, public schools, who do not even have the structures and all of this?
Yes, so primarily they've always been my concern because you would agree with me that there are a lot of schools that today, even what they need to learn adequately, they don't have it. They don't have chairs, they don't have tables, they don't have blackboards, they don't even have whiteboards, okay? Teachers come in and we know what happens in those schools. So unfortunately, those are the places that I'm most concerned about, which was why I said I had a feeling of fear when the government announced that children should go back to school. Saying that, so what happens to schools like that? Because those are the schools where you don't have tables, you don't have chairs, but you have 40, 50 children cramped up in one classroom. What happens? Do we have people who will ensure that they're checking the temperatures? How do you sensitize them to ensure that they keep social distancing? Because understand that some of them also come from environments where they say the virus is a hoax, the virus is a lie. And so how do you then handle them when they get to school? To let them know that, you know what, the virus is real, you're likely to die, and you need to be responsible about it. So for me, that has been a huge fear factor for me.
All right.
Now, when the pandemic began, a lot of people began to explore the use of perhaps having e-learning, deepening the use of internet and everything that has to do
Online learning.
with
Really
the
interesting.
web.
Yeah.
Now, if we are to look at that, to explore, because safety is what we are after here, what is the possibility of perhaps having this examination via online and every other means? Would it be accessible for everyone?
Ideally, it should, but unfortunately, it won't, for various reasons. One being that ideally, but why I said ideally it should is you'd expect that such examinations would hold very likely in schools, okay? If you say people should sit down in their homes, you can only limit examination malpractice to a certain level, okay? So there has to be some form of control. But that being said, We know today that there are a lot of schools, especially public schools, that don't even have tables, let alone chairs. So having to say that maybe they'll have to write those examinations online because they do not even have any existing computer lab. There are pictures we've seen online where people have been taught how to use the computer by the teacher drawing on the blackboard. So, I mean, where do we go from there? So yes, ideally we should be there right now, but we're very far from it, unfortunately. So yes, we'll still have to do the in-person paper and biro, or the pencil and the paper format for now. But I think that is something we should look forward to. But like we've seen, and I've said earlier, that the government, they're not quite serious about a lot of things because, I mean, in the middle of this pandemic, we've had our health and education budget gutted, okay? The situation where everybody's trying to see how they can harness whatever resources they can within these sectors, given the current reality we face. But we are here right now, and it's an unfortunate place that we are as a people and as a nation, and our government, they really need to do more.
All right. Now, the exam that the students are going to sit for is conducted by West African countries, the West African Senior School Certificate Examination. Most of the countries in West Africa are suffering from the same, almost the same level of the impact of COVID-19. And one would wonder, why the hurry of students must go on with exams when the numbers are soaring across all the countries? Kenya, for instance, have decided, you know what, 2020 academic year is lost. Let's just make that conclusion and prepare towards January 2021 to commence examinations. One would think that these countries, West African countries, will come to reason in that regard instead of saying students must have to sit for exams at this time.
Okay, yeah. For me, I would say that for me is a sign of a lack of synergy. And it's a lack of synergy because I would have expected that the ministers of education in the various countries will have been able to have a serious conversation to say that, you know what, is there a possibility for us to move these examinations? Because the question is, must it hold at this time? Okay, can it be moved further? What would be the implications if it holds now? What would be the implications if it is moved further? If we're moving it further, what are the conditions? Are we looking to say that maybe within the next 6 months, if we take an aggregate of the numbers of cases we have in our nations, if it's down by 20%, then we can hold the examinations. If it's not down by 20%, then we can't have them. But unfortunately, that's not what we're seeing right now. And we just have, I believe we have people who are unable to adapt and who are not being flexible and as well not being realistic with the expectations.
Now, WHO has said that COVID-19 will be with us for a long time.
Yes.
And so if we do not open schools now, sometime along the line, we would definitely reopen schools.
Yes.
But again, a lot of persons have said this is the time for us to begin to look at making the necessary readjustments that COVID-19 has posed. It has exposed the dearth in education and how we need to begin to bridge the gaps. What policies would you be expecting government to begin to frame such that we look holistically at addressing all of these issues that we are being faced with, so that COVID-19 has exposed us to at this point?
Well, interestingly, within the Nigerian context, I think what we need is more than policy. We need a huge, huge investment in infrastructure, because there are a lot of nations of the world who have reopened schools. Taiwan, for example, they didn't really close the schools down. They were on holiday by then, and they just extended the holiday by 10 days, and they were back in school. We have nations like Norway, New Zealand, Germany, and some other countries who opened between April and May. The reason why I drew out these examples is, if you take a look at all these nations, look at the educational system pre-COVID, you will see that the necessary structures were in place to even ensure that education was going to happen, or people were going to get educated smoothly. Unfortunately, that's not what we have in this climate right now. We have a lot of schools where we don't have tables, we don't have chairs, we don't even have ceilings. The environment isn't even conducive enough for education, let alone adapting it to be educated in the COVID-19 era. So the first priority for us, that I would say, is we need to invest a lot into infrastructure and then see how we can infuse the COVID-19 protocols into said infrastructure.
Okay.
All right. Dikpo Oyewole, thank you so much for speaking with us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.